Chapter 2 Nightmare Nelson. She walked across the campus of Glencoe High School looking straight ahead. The girl didn't look at any of the other students as they passed in her wake. This was her ritual. She described her daily high school process as a shampoo lifestyle to her Grandma May once. Wash, rinse, and repeat till you feel clean, she stated. It's mundane, I know, but it gets me by. Just get there, suffer through it, get to the next place, start suffering again till the day is done, and she could return home where she was comfortable, not especially happy, but accepted and safe. She had her parents and her Grandma May, who she knew loved her, and this was good enough for her. It was the beginning of the second week of school, her junior year. Returning to school, whether it was the first day or the first day back from a weekend, was never something she looked forward to. She was what you could call an outcast, and had been most of her life. There were a few people in her school that tolerated her and who didn't tease her regularly, but on the whole, people looked down on her. They treated her as though she was a disease. She was the brunt of their jokes all through school. No one befriended her for fear of catching whatever it was that caused people to treat her so badly, so she was alone and learned to survive that way. Elementary school had been hard from about third grade on, but her mother's stubbornness, which she inherited, was something that helped her through it. Middle school was the same, but she had gotten to the point that it didn't faze her as much. By the time she entered high school, she was pretty much entirely emotionally calloused. Very little was able to punch through the shield she had created around herself. She was almost completely impervious to any insults. Almost. As she walked towards the building's entrance, she spotted him. Leonard Mason. He sat by the door with a circle of his friends, basking in their admiration as if it would give him a better tan. Not that he needed one. He was pretty much perfect, and that just made things worse. He was exactly the kind of boy she would develop a crush on if she didn't loathe him so much. As she glanced at him, she could feel a cold sweat break her skin and the bottom of her stomach drop painfully. Her throat felt as if it was closing up on her, and she swallowed hard in an effort not to choke on the hate that was so thick. She felt the heat growing in her, and she looked away from him as fast as she could. She hated him, with everything she was. Maybe I can slip past him without him seeing me and avoid today's dose of poison, she thought to herself as she made a beeline for the door, odium rushing through her veins. She was almost there. Just 10 or 15 more paces, and she'd be past him and inside the building. Would she make it? No. Her skin burned as she heard him yell at her with a truly hateful and sarcastic tone. Hey, Nightmare, wake up drooling any time lately? He hadn't lost his touch. Bam! It hit her, knocking against her facade, cracking it ever so slightly. The discomfort that he caused her with just that one comment was borderline painful, and she hated him even more. Would he ever forget about that? It had been 8 years, and he still remembered. So chances were he wouldn't forget. One time I fall asleep in class, and I never will live it down, she thought to herself, all because Leonard had been witness to it. You'd think that falling asleep in class, especially at the young age of 8, wouldn't really stand out. Everyone's done it, right? Not everyone talks in their sleep, though, like Larissa did, and she was having a pretty vivid dream at the time. Add all that together, and you have the perfect recipe for pure cruelty fodder to last the ages. She hated herself for letting him get to her, and she didn't know how he was able to find that one tender spot, the one vulnerable chink in her armor, and jab his carefully sharpened words right into that spot. She didn't respond to his comments, but she knew that he could tell it affected her, and he enjoyed it just a little too much. It seemed that he took pleasure in causing her distress more than anyone else, because he made a habit of it. Usually she was able to withstand it, even though it was painful, but there were the few occasions that she spent the night crying herself to sleep because of something he said or did to her. In the 5th grade, she had finished a beautifully crafted science project for their school science fair. She was very excited about this project because its subject was one that was close to her heart, astronomy. She loved the stars, the constellations, their Greek origins, the moon, and everything to do with the night sky, be it fact or fiction. Her Grandma May spent hours with her, stargazing and telling her fanciful stories about the heavens when she was little. So when she chose her science project subject, of course she would ask Grandma May to help her. The project took 2 weeks to finish, and they spent much of that time painting styrofoam balls and drawing glittery scenes of the heavens. They worked together, digging through books, and wrote a 4-page paper about how the stars held our destiny, and if you knew how to read them, it helped to guide you through your life. Even though it was a lot of hard work, she didn't mind because she was spending time with Grandma May. She was very excited about how it turned out and very proud of her hard work. The day of the science fair came, and her mother dropped her off at the back of the school, with a box full of colorfully painted orbs dangling into the center of the box from strings tied through holes punched at the top of the box. All the beautifully glittered scenes that she made with Grandma May were carefully glued on the sides, top, and bottom of the box, and her paper in its folder, neatly tucked under her arm. As she approached the school carefully, walking slowly as not to mess up her project, she was halted by someone stepping in front of her. She looked up from her project and almost dropped it when she saw Leonard and a group of his spineless followers standing just behind him. "What's that, Nelson? Your lunch?" he mockingly said, and looked around to cue his dim-witted friends to laugh at the joke he just made, which they did. "Go away, Leonard," she spat at him angrily. "Leave me alone." "Make me, Nightmare," he hissed angrily at her as he bumped into the box she was gingerly carrying on purpose to add punctuation to his challenge. "Don't do that. You'll ruin my science project," she said as she readjusted her grip on the box that was almost knocked loose from his bumping her. "Is that what that is? Ha! I thought it was just a bunch of junk." He knocked the box down to the ground, sending 2 of the meticulously painted balls rolling across the grass. "Hey!" she screamed as she bent down to pick up the box and see if she could fix it, dropping her paper from its safe place tucked under her arm. He was quick, though. He spotted the folder falling to the ground and snatched it up as fast as he could, opening it and reading the title out loud to his dense, giggling cohorts. "Destiny in the stars, what do they hold for us?" "Ha ha!" he mockingly laughed. "More magic from the Nielsen freaks. Look, guys, she can tell your future from the stars. You and your stupid family really are the weirdest freaks," he said, as he gripped the folder forcefully with both hands and proceeded to rip it up into several pieces and drop it on the ground in front of her. She watched the pieces of paper fly away from her in the wind for a moment before she stood and faced him, her hands clenched into fists and her face flushed bright red with anger. "We're not freaks, you dumbhead!" she screamed at him, which sent him and his groupies into fits of giggles. She stood there watching them laugh at her pain, laugh at her family, laugh at the things she loved until she couldn't take it anymore. "Stop it!" she yelled at the top of her lungs, which Leonard did, only to give her a smirk and stomp as hard as he could on what remained of the box that she had worked so hard on with her grandma. "There's your future, Nightmare Nelson," he said as he viciously stared her down. Then he spit in her face before he walked away smugly with his friends, trailing behind him, laughing and mimicking Larissa, calling Leonard a dumbhead. "You got her good, Mason," she heard one of Leonard's followers say, as they walked away, leaving her with the saliva turning cold as it crept down her cheek, mingling with her stinging hot tears. She stood sobbing for a few moments before she furiously wiped the spit and tears from her face. She ran from the school to the safety of her Grandma May's arms. Grandma May always seemed to know the right thing to say to make her feel better, but nothing Grandma May could say would make him stop. Eventually she learned that she had to acclimate herself to the constant and unpredictable lightning strikes from Leonard Mason. She walked through the doors of the high school, hearing those same friends laughing along with him. Their laughs echoed in her head as she walked down the hall, focusing on no one. Only 2 more years, and she won't have to see his face or hear his nasty remarks again. "You can do it, Larissa," she told herself as she continued down the hall, heading for her locker. After the first few people by the door watched her amused, the interest was lost, and people went back to what they were doing. She got to the end of the hall, close to the back exit, and turned to her locker. She looked at the painted metal door in front of her, and her eyes focused on the word "Nightmare" scratched into the paint on the door. She remembered when that word was scratched there her freshman year by none other than the bane of her existence at Glencoe, Leonard. She didn't like using her locker because she didn't like being reminded of him or having a place where he could target her regularly. Usually she tried to keep her books in her backpack, but she had accumulated a large number of books this year and she couldn't avoid it. She carefully dialed the combination into the lock and pulled the latch up with some effort. It seemed that, unlike Leonard, her locker had become rusty over time. She opened her backpack, putting her extra pencils and notebook paper in neat stacks in the empty locker. She put her books meticulously from her backpack into an orderly stack arranged by her class schedule. She then grabbed her math book and a pencil. Finally, removing her binder from her backpack, she hung the almost empty bag from the hook at the back of the locker. All the while, she told herself that what Leonard said didn't matter, that he didn't matter. She could get through this year and things would be fine. She could do it. She closed her locker and spun the combination lock, then turned to head to her math class, the first class of the day. As she turned, she almost crashed into someone who had been standing right behind her watching her, hovering so close that if she wasn't so preoccupied trying to repair the crack in her shield, she would have felt them standing there.